Now, so Ireland victorious in New Zealand. They join an incredibly exclusive club, it must be said. Maybe the most exclusive club in rugby. We have South Africa in 1937, we have Australia in 1986, and we have France 1994, and now Ireland 2022. So Lions in 71, the only other side to manage a series win on Kiwi soil. This is rare and historic, to say the very least. Brian O'Driscoll, you're very welcome.
Hey Joe, good to be here.
It is insane when you realize it's South Africa in 37, Australia in 86, France 94, Ireland 2022, the end.
We just think about how many tours must have gone through New Zealand. Sure enough, we had an awful lot goes through the noughties and through the last decade. But it is an amazing feat. It was a brilliant one-off in the second test to have won a test down there, which was huge. But that wasn't enough for this team. They really sensed, that they were there for the taking, and their performance in the third test was nothing short of exquisite. Like, it's funny, I was away at the Open over the weekend. I did manage to see the test before I went down to the golf course, and as much as people were interested in talking about Rory, everyone was on a high. Not just Irish people, everyone was on a high on about the Irish performance. It was certainly, the first half was the best Irish performance I've ever seen. And I'll say that, I'll caveat that by saying, I almost think that the New Zealand performance in November was the best performance I'd seen before that. So this team is getting progressively better and continuing with those consistently high levels. And now that, what this will do to hopefully catapult them forward over the next year, all the messages about, continued progression and learning and evolution, and that's all the important sound bites, but they've got to take heed of what they're saying too. But I think they have a game plan that's capable of doing that, where previously I think it was quite formulaic. I think this is now a case of just picking the right option of two or three that you create for yourself at different times throughout the game.
So why, I mean, that's a big statement. Why was this the best 40 minutes of rugby you've seen from an Irish team?
It was very comprehensive, and I said I kind of thought at 20 minutes, God, we're only 5-3 up. How is that? It just didn't feel as though New Zealand had been given any access into the game. They kicked the ball away through being forced to do so. Geez, I've never seen a New Zealand team putting up a Gary Owen from a line out 30 meters out. And I understand maybe they're trying different parts of their game, but it just felt that we rendered them devoid of ideas, not in the second half, but relatively early on, after 20 minutes, half an hour. And they did go to their kick game with mixed success. But I think it was the pressure, whatever about what we were doing in attack, and that's been largely heralded. I think what we're doing, our organization in defense, our ability to work with one another, has really come on leaps and bounds. I know we talked about it last week, but again, it was so evident with the personnel in key positions, their setup, trying to get their close forwards in close to the rucks. But even when they were cut out in the wider extremities, there's total comfort there in the system, pressing hard, forcing teams into making decisions they don't want to make. Just so much good stuff to take from the defensive side as much as the attack.
This is such an unbelievable turnaround the last 12, 18 months in Andy Farrell's tenure. I
Yeah,
distinctly
well,
remember talking to you early on,
mhm.
and you were, amongst others, remarking on the fact that there was no obvious attacking plan. You were trying to work out what they were trying to do and not coming up with much. And equally, there was a sense that the good parts of the Schmidt regime, like the breakdown work, that those aspects were slipping. It was like the worst of two worlds, and now here we are.
I know it is amazing turnaround, and obviously that England game in the Aviva was the real catalyst. It felt like all the parts seemed to slip into place there, and then I think they used the summer tour and the confidence derived from that, and then into the November internationals to really kick on. Yeah, I'll be the first to admit I didn't see it coming, because I was trying to understand what the shape was, what they were trying to do. And, it did take 18 months, but, you got to hold your hands up sometimes and go, fair play to them, stuck at
Yeah.
it. They persisted. They put an awful lot of kind of of the focus on their senior player team allowed them to really dictate what they wanted to play. I think they're playing heads up rugby like they said they were going to, but to a different level completely. We thought there was going to be kind of a halfway house from what the Joe Schmidt era was with this heads up rugby. But now I think the scanning and the ability of key personnel being able to scan defensive systems and play heads up is at a level that I'm not sure anyone else is playing currently. So, yes, you have to be mindful of not getting overly excited. We've been in this sort of territory before, but gosh, you got to enjoy being number one in the world and justified this time.
That scanning and that heads up, maybe you just planted a seed there touching my mind, but geez, it didn't half feel like New Zealand props were facing people they didn't want to face all that often. So is that Ireland manipulating things so that we see you and we're going to work things and we're coming your way?
Well, a perfect example of that was the third try, and there's so much to kind of pull apart in it. This is the Henshaw try, a few minutes before half time. The setup was, rarely do you see Hugo Keenan carrying the ball, but I was trying to wonder, he kind of got stuck inside shoulder a little bit. Did he just not want to shove launch it? So he carried, but I think he was meant to carry because Robbie Henshaw was clearly going to clear over him immediately. Barrett's the one that makes the tackle. But it's what happens next. It's Doris around the corner, but their willingness and ability to spring back to their feet and get out to position to strike again. It's difficult to do 1 and 3, to get as a back to get into your, outside positions, having had a big involvement, particularly someone like Hugo Keenan who's been tackled. But if you then look at the third phase, and it's Barrett who made the tackle, who ordinarily should be the easier of the two to get up into the defensive line. He's late to get around. He runs around an arc rather than filling into the defensive line immediately, runs out, is late getting off the line, and ends up going for an intercept because he's in no man's land. And counter that with Henshaw and the rebound of Keenan to get outside, hold enough depth to be able to play what the two players in front of them, Sexton first, then Bundy, and then Henshaw's in and scoring. And it could have been, if he was marked up, then if another player came in and defended him, it would have been a try to Keenan. So it's a desire too to get up off the ground and make an effort on that third phase. So a lot of the time teams in the past would have gone first phase and fourth. To get up and have as big an impact as that with only one phase in between with quick ruck ball is a testament to their fitness, their desire and their willingness to work really hard and catch the opposition off guard, which they did. By the way, Barrett's attempted intercept, I know he was caught in no man's land, but it banged a little bit of, I've got this. He's been there before and he's picked them off, and you've got to laud people when they're able to read that. But when they get it wrong and it's a catastrophe of their team, you got to call that up as well. I thought it was really, really sloppy defense from him and a little bit selfish, thinking that he could pick it off. And he was trying to get into Johnny's head, and be careful to do that, because I think Johnny, like nobody else at the moment, is able to pick that pass really late and read shoulders and read shapes and pick the right option.
It's a terribly unfair question, and you're not a disinterested party, having been there in 2009. I think people are tempted to say this is the biggest achievement in Irish rugby.
I couldn't possibly disagree with that. Obviously, we won 3 Grand Slams. The first one well before our time. It was a real momentous occasion in 2009 to get to where we got to eventually get to the holy grail of a Grand Slam. We'd picked off victories against South Africa and Australia a bit more regularly throughout the noughties. We left one behind in 2007, but the reality is that only served as a catalyst for greater achievements. Another Grand Slam, these continual victories against the All Blacks, but ultimately going and winning a series, 2 of 3 games down in New Zealand. You read out at the start of the show, who the others are. Like, this is a really, really special thing that this group of players have achieved. So I certainly wouldn't be putting up any form of argument to say that this isn't the greatest achievement. But the great thing is that it feels like it's the scope to be the beginning of something, not the end product, but that this group, if they can continue with this level of progression, will cause every team at the World Cup hassle. I'm not saying we're going to win it. I'm not saying we're necessarily going to go further, but they're going to continue causing real problems with the caliber of how the individuals and the collective are clicking.
Yeah, and like there is such a temptation to say everything's about the World Cup, and even this series win has been greeted with, well, from certain quarters, it doesn't matter unless they do something at the World Cup. I think that's like willfully ignoring the actual tradition and the history of the game, where there are no glorified friendlies. These are test matches. The fact that only 3 countries have won in New Zealand speaks to that. This in and of itself is an extraordinary achievement, and I don't think it's such that in 18 months' time, if they lose a World Cup quarterfinal, that this should be looked back on and say, well, look, that just proves it was nothing. This is not nothing. And anyone saying that is, I think willfully ignoring the reality of the game.
Of course, there would be massive naysayers in that regard. People are sharpening their knives, can't wait for it again, hoping that, we might get France and at home, or get a rejuvenated All Black team and to put us back in our box a little bit. But the reality is, I think you can look at them separately. This will never be taken away from them. You don't fluke 2 victories down there. Even the World Cup winning team, like the English World Cup winning team in 2003, did manage a victory, but not 2 down there. So this is significant out on its own. And I don't want to kind of caveat that by future-proofing disappointment in a World Cup. We were still very expectant of this team to be able to go beyond a quarterfinal, irrespective of the opposition, such as where they are at the moment. But yet they're going to have to play an exceptional game, and even to go on to greater things. All of a sudden now, we're not talking these. I'd love to be a fly in the wall. They're not talking about a World Cup semi-final. In their heads, they want to win it, and it feels very un-Irish to do that because we haven't been in a World Cup semi-final. But as we said in the show last week, a losing World Cup semi-final is a disappointment right now.
Yeah. And
with a view, trying to draw the analysis between which is a greater victory. Now, no doubt, a victory in New Zealand is greater than a lost World Cup semi-final. Of that, I have no doubt. And it was, there's a lot of interest generated around this. And on the back of what happened last weekend, I'm glad I said what I said, because I stand by it. A World Cup final would be a greater achievement than a series win, but nothing short of that will outdo this brilliant achievement and feat.
It's funny.
And let them enjoy it too. Let us all enjoy it.
Totally.
Let us enjoy it.
I agree with that totally. I know even I was guilty of
ranking
ranking something
fairness.
Here. Yeah,
people are really, people like South Africans, English, Welsh people, every nationality out besides Kiwis were thrilled at the weekend. It wasn't that Ireland won, it was the manner in which they won, the way they played, the standard, the quality, the tries, how they played New Zealand at their own brand. And that's the exceptional part of that series victory is that, particularly when backs to the wall, 17-22, then it got to within 3 points, wasn't it? 24, was it again 24, 27, or, like, you have to show balls to get to come back from that and take risk and be brave and go to the corner rather than kicking your goal. They're not insignificant decisions. So to match up and deliver them, and then subsequently deliver the try that you need from Herring, and then keep that scoreboard ticking over, all of that is really, you got to dig deep for that, and in your reserves of belief, and this team has that in spades.
The other very notable aspect of this tour, and we weren't sure in advance what way Andy Farrell was going to play it, is that Farrell has very much prioritised the winning of this series over World Cup preparation. Now, I guess the 2-1 win vindicates that. There's different ways to look at it. Like, I did hear people saying at the start of the tour, he needs to be brave and to play the Carberries of the world and to play the lesser lights. In some ways, it's a very brave thing to risk playing your best team and maybe you lose the tour 3-0, and then where are you? Like, you've got the worst of both worlds. In a way, he did quite a brave thing by saying, I'm going to try and win this bloody series, because the easy thing would be to play the lesser lights, and then you've got a foolproof excuse. I'm building for the World Cup. So I think that decision, which was not a popular one, I felt, my sense was people thought, you've got to play the others. You can't just play the best 15. That decision now looks Well, one, incredibly brave, and it has been vindicated.
Yeah, it has been vindicated. Who thought that Johnny was going to start all three test matches down there? No one.
Hmm.
This was going to be, there was talk of 1-1-1. Remember, the forgotten man, Harry Byrne, was down on tour as well. All of a sudden, Frawley's the one that's probably emerged a little bit more. Joey came on the third test, and I know he was only on for 6 or 7 minutes, but looked solid and secure. And I think he's very capable in that role. But I think there will, no matter what, there will be a nervousness and a concern if we are to lose our leader and our captain and probably our best player and the focal point of the team over the course of the next year. But we're going to have to, at some point, learn how to deal without him, because you just can't. The reality is nothing changes. You can't, because Johnny's managed to navigate his way through this test series brilliantly. It doesn't mean that at other times he's going to be targeted all the more now. Teams realize how important he is to this team all the more, so he's going to be more targeted. And so we're going to have to give game time over the course of November and at Six Nations to Joey or somebody else. Like, you just can't continue to giving Johnny time and not give Joey some proper 60, 70, 80-minute games to allow him, high octane internationals as well, not the USA, not the lesser games. Because you would be left with egg on your face if you just put all your eggs into one basket. And that's not just Ireland. I think other countries have to look likewise. England, Marcus Smith, if they give him every test match from now to the World Cup, how that's different for them, I suppose, because Farrell goes in there and Ford's in there. But someone else that has a pretty inexperienced bench player, I think they've got to weigh up their options. But yet you're allowed, he's able to retrospectively look at those decisions as really great ones. And maybe that gives him scope in this coming Six Nations to try people out a little bit more now that he's got the work in the bank.
That was the follow-up question. There is a degree of, okay, you've gone after this tour and it's worked out beautifully, but now Six Nations, you really can't afford to do the same thing, because where are we? Carberry, Harry Byrne, once again, his injury profile's worrying, you would have to say. And now Frawley's kind of emerged to put his hand up. He needs, from Farrell that is, he needs to kind of figure out that pecking order and to invest in the Six Nations, because there are no other opportunities now.
All right, but here's a line of thought, and at the risk of other countries saying, God, those Irish have really lost the run of themselves and they're arrogant. We've England and France at home, a somewhat resurgent Wales, Scotland, not sure about Italy, maybe on the up, but is that potential for a Grand Slam year? Will Johnny Sexton be saying, do you know what, everything is the focus of World Cup? He'll be thinking Grand Slam captain. He will. I know his mentality, and he'll want to play, and also not give an opportunity, because he'll back himself to play 5 weeks on the bounce, in game, the second and third group stage matches, if they get beyond the quarterfinal, to then play semi-final, final. That's a nice headache to have when you get to that point. But it's very hard when you get to each stage. It's hard not to get greedy and go, well, we could still go and win that. We could win that. It's very hard to go, no, let's cut our cloth a little bit and not play the strongest team. But it is something that they're going to need to do.
Is it a ridiculous thing to say when we get to the World Cup, Sexton's not going to play in the group stages?
I don't see how he can't play in the last two games. I think he'll obviously, the way it falls, obviously we get South Africa second last. Depending on what happens there, is there scope potentially for, with a victory against South Africa in a perfect world, him not playing the following week because there's pressure up? Because who do you want in the quarterfinal? France and New Zealand right now. It's mad that we're having that conversation. 10 years ago, you'd bitten your hand off for France. That's not the case right now, particularly with France at home and how good they have shown themselves to be and how much they're improving. So, I think we're not sure ideally where we want to be, but I think as things evolve, I don't think he has to pick the Scotland team before the South Africa game. You get a great victory against South Africa, maybe you can play somebody else and and run a small bit of a risk with the view that you're definitely in a quarterfinal and that you're going to have your, your talisman to kind of guide you through. Because look at other games when he hasn't been right. In 2015 he didn't play in that game, and God, could we have done against Argentina? Yeah. So it is about getting him in that quarterfinal, but we got to get there first. So lose South Africa, he's going to play against Scotland.
I'm almost saying you're not playing. That's South Africa is the one game you're not playing. Like
no,
of all the games you're not going near.
But like that,
where is he going to get injured? Where is he going to get injured?
You could get injured in any game.
I know,
you could get injured against Spain.
I know, but you know the difference here. You know what I'm saying?
I know, but that's the game that he just has to throw the pass half a second earlier, because they're flying up anyway, and just let the speed of the ball and man dictate. So there's ways of modifying things, but he will get targeted in that game, no doubt, because they're all of a sudden, for the first time, I think, other countries feel as though we genuinely are a threat at Rugby World Cup at this point.
Yeah.
By the brand. But yet they'll be also kind of a bit sneery, the fact that we've never done it before and that there'll be a lot of pressure on us. So I think the way the games are falling, Johnny does have to play against South Africa, and then you take a viewpoint on the following game, depending on that result.
Okay. And just the last one on this whole bloody topic, because I mean it's never ending. To what extent, at the end of this tour now, has Frawley closed the gap on Carbery in your mind?
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see whether, obviously Johnny's not going to play an awful lot for Leinster this year. He'll play some big European Cup games, but he'll play hardly any URC games. So Frawley, you would imagine, even with Ross Byrne and with Harry Byrne in there, you'd imagine that Frawley's going to get a little bit more game time. At 10, certainly, if that is the wish list of the national team, that I'm sure Stuart Lancaster and Leo will listen to it, and they will try and accommodate where possible. And if that's where he sees his future, well, I think he's got to try and push that narrative hard with his Leinster coaching ticket, and say that he'll fight for a starting 10 berth. Because I think right now, what he's shown over the course of the last year, he's a better option there. We haven't seen Harry, and his injury issues have really thrown him way down the pecking order, from a guy that showed had such high prospects 18 months ago. Now is barely in the conversation just because he can't get himself on the pitch. So Frawley for me is the guy, third at the moment behind Joey Carbery, because Joey's done nothing major wrong, albeit a bit low in confidence, but he needs to get back to Munster, new coaching ticket. You're the main man. This is how we're going to play, and hopefully play his way into a little bit of form, and then get a bit more game time come November.
Peter Manny was talking after the game at the weekend, and he was remembering 2012. You were there, he was there, and he was just drawing the comparison and how much it's all changed from an emotional point of view. He said 2012, it was so much still about emotion, whereas now it's so process oriented. And the high of that win in Test 2, traditionally, even if they had come close or as you guys did or won, traditionally Irish team would be wiped 7 days later. Just they would have emptied the tank. And you even see after the Hackett, they get in a circle and do some mindfulness breathing. So it is extraordinary in a decade how much that approach has changed.
Yeah, it has. The game is evolving significantly, and with each 4-year cycle brings a massively new iteration. And professionalism, certainly since I have finished, has come on leaps and bounds. You look at the condition of the players alone, but I think huge credit to the fitness coaches as well. They really seem to have players. And the medical staff, they're coming back from serious injuries quicker. They're obviously getting better surgeries, they're better rehab, but their fitness and their ability to peak on Saturdays is really impressive right at the moment. I'm always mindful in all conversation that it can be transient, it can change, and through injury or lack of form. So you can only talk in the now, but they do look as though they're all of a sudden physically able to compete with everyone. Now the big question marks around how they compete physically with South Africa when they come to town in November. I think that'll be a real litmus test. But that's what really stood out for me in New Zealand, was their ability to play with them physically. And we're talking about some of the best athletes. Artie Sevilla obviously was a real standout performer for there, but Retallick and Whitelock, guys like Sam Kane, before recent years would have been, big physical, ferocious players. Whereas, Doris, Peter O'Mahony, our front row, all like at least parity with the opposition, and won the collision zone an awful lot.
Yeah. Were you surprised at the quality from New Zealand this tour?
A bit. But I think if you look, all right, the second row, they're absolutely in the winters of their career. They're, they were involved. I don't know if Whitelock, was he involved in 2011? Certainly came on board around 2012. He's going a decade in the row, a lot of miles on the clock. Retallick, something similar. And the reality is, it just takes its toll physically on you. All those test caps, both of them over 100. You just can't play with that same energy and kind of vitality that you do as a youthful player. You might have the same enthusiasm, but the body just doesn't respond to the message being sent from up top. And it feels as though that quality has probably slipped a little bit. I think as well, the front row, you think about the Franks brothers, you think about Tony Woodcock, those caliber of players. Any of the props, kind of real standout performers for New Zealand. Cody Taylor, good in parts. Dane Coles, again, another one in the winter of his career. So I don't know. I just don't think that there's the ferociousness of their front five like there used to be. And then, right across the backs of if you look at the best New Zealand teams, 4 or 5 of those positions picked themselves before you even had to, think about it.
Yeah.
Right now, Havili's in and out of 12, probably in a bit more when he's fit. Moanga had a brilliant Super Rugby campaign, but he's on the bench. Barrett's not at his best. Smith kind of coming into the winter of his career. All of these factors, on top of maybe not playing with massive confidence in the black jersey, struggling a bit with what they're trying to do structurally. I think it was the first time I saw a New Zealand team struggling for ideas. So I think there's multiple factors. Ireland putting loads of pressure on them, but also I don't think this New Zealand team is picking itself yet, which the great New Zealand teams, before you blink, 8 of them on the side. Whereas right now, I don't think you could guarantee 8 starters, off the top of your head. Sevilla and 14 others, maybe.
Yeah. So New Zealand Rugby have announced a review. And for instance, I saw John Kirwan come out and he said, we had a review in November. He said, we did a review 6 months ago. Why are we doing another review? What are we reviewing? So 6 months on, it's another review. Apparently 6 months ago, Foster reviewed very well. His assistants less so. And that probably explains Joe Schmidt's imminent arrival. That's so interesting. You say the thinking maybe has gone into decline. Fair enough. You mightn't always produce the same generation of players, I suppose, but they were always, or they probably took over from the Australians, but for, I don't know, the last 20, 30 years, they have felt like the thought leaders in the game. So that's really significant that they've gone back on that front.
Yeah, and you're right. It is cyclical, and there are, even the great nations like New Zealand can, peak and slightly trough with the player quality coming through. And but I was wondering, and my kind of train of thought was, if you are looking at them World Cup quarterfinalists, if we lost the third ticket or third test match, it obviously would have been massively disappointing, but it would have been the worst thing in the world because that coaching ticket wasn't going to change. And this All Black team looks as though it's struggling. It really does. And whereas knowing someone like Joe Schmidt or hearing what Scott Robertson is like, and that attention to detail, would they not be the perfect fit to come in and do something in a short period of time? Particularly Joe, I know him a lot more. Like, he is made for this situation, this circumstance where their passing quality has been really poor. Their unforced errors, so un New Zealand like. Yeah. Whereas I think all of those aspects, sharpen all that up, body contact, accuracy at the ruck, he would get all of that side right. And then the knock-on effects, them playing their free-flowing game happens organically. So it's not really a New Zealand thing to kind of cut people to go, right, panic stations, get someone else in. So I can understand that they're trying to work with Ian Foster, but who knows, in a year's 15 months time, will it be to their detriment that they haven't been more brutal with their decision making and bring in someone that definitely would fix things in in a very short space of time. And that's the sense that I get from either of those two guys, but particularly with Joe.
Some of the standout Irish performers we should touch on. Tadhg bloody Byrne.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that was a weird 15 minutes. That was superhuman.
Yeah, it was superhuman. Like, we all know every time, like, his ability to read the ruck and identify and not get himself in as an assist tackler, but yet be the first to latch on. And I think teams all over the world now will be paying, credence to the fact that, if he's the first guy, if he wins the ball, if he wins the shoulder, you're not moving him. It's his ability to get down and not just lock onto the ball, because referees now need you to steal the ball, but he steals it in no time. So his ability to get into that position and then turn it over really quickly before the player fighting on the ground is aware that they've lost it is a real point of difference. So that his intercept, the timing on the counter ruck was outstanding. He was, very good line out stealed. He was immense. He really was. Best I've ever seen him play for Ireland. And he's been very consistent. I always would have worried about him as from a physicality point of view. He runs really clever lines and he uses good footwork, and I think he uses his strengths as best possible. But sometimes it's just hard to deal with that huge physicality that he doesn't really possess. But he was really outstanding and didn't in any shape or form on that side of things look out of place against what are meant to be the ferocious, one of the most ferocious type fives.
Not bad for a Leinster reject in his mid-20s. It's kind of,
isn't it
just? It's
amazing.
Isn't it
just? Yeah, it's a real find that he's gone the circuitous route to come back to be a mainstay of this Irish team. And now sometimes you just need those performances. Like, there was question marks around, is it Henderson starts, is it him? Like, that's blown that out the water. Like, there's no, he's got 3 bad games in him now before he gets the Shepherd's Crook. Because that was such an excellent performance. And coaches do look to big moments, when players really need to stand up and deliver. They go back to the well and go, well, who does it? And if he looks between what's happened, Henderson's been very good, but nothing on that level of performance. And so that partnership now is the two boys, Ryan and Tadhg Byrne, for a while to look.
I wonder, how many bad games were you allowed before you got the Shepherd's Crook? 50, 100?
Standards were not quite as high back then.
Well, you didn't have many.
with respect to the quality of players that I was played with over my 15 years, I think the difference between first, second, and third in all positions now, not all positions, in most positions, has been significantly reduced. So you can't afford, you'll be allowed, afforded 1 bad game, 2 bad games, and you're going to be gone, and someone else is going to be given their opportunity. And that's why guys like Johnny don't want to give up, the chance to anyone, even Joey or anyone, because if you're out of possession, it's an opportunity for someone else.
In fairness to you didn't have many bad games. James Ryan.
Thanks for coming delayed on that. No, listen, if genuinely, like, talking about bad performances like that New Zealand 2012, one of the worst games I ever played for Ireland in the 3rd test. We got thumped. Everyone played terribly, but I was awful. I read nothing on it. I just closed the season and pretended it didn't happen, and then tried to start afresh. But if there was something else the following week, there would have been serious words had around standards. So it's a different environment. There just wasn't the same level of quality there is now, coming through to displace anyone that's a permanent fixture.
James Ryan has generally kept his powder pretty dry over the last couple of years. He did go on Instagram and put up a picture of the team celebrating, and he referenced it's been a tough couple of seasons. Right. And you suspect he's referring to concussions, but also, I suppose, the scrutiny around his form, and there's been a huge amount of scrutiny around his form. I generally said, or I read in different things, generally said he had his best game of the series on Saturday just gone. And Johnny Sexton made a point of saying, you referenced earlier when New Zealand got back to within 3. Sexton made a point of saying it was Ryan who dictated they kick for the corner when they got that try. He was saying it was great leadership and great to see it. And you kind of think of Leinster maybe kicking for the posts in the La Rochelle final, and you think these things almost rebound off each other from week to week at times. But regardless, James Ryan, I suppose, could you explain to us, his form dipped, right? And everybody said he's not the same player. Specifically, why was he not the same player? And to what extent is he on the road back?
I think a bit of the problem was that he started as a professional and he won his first 18 or 19 games,
Yeah.
right? Won everything that season. It was a Grand Slam year. Leinster won Europe. So it was a fairy tale start. And then, there is a little bit of second or third season syndrome where people work you out a little bit more. It's not as easy. The yards are harder to come by. And then, disappointments of not getting picked on the Lions tour. He wasn't Gatz's sort of player. He wasn't physically big enough. So, he's definitely a thinking man second row, because, he doesn't have the size of a Mostard or an Etzebeth, but yet he has this incredible work rate, a real cleverness of where to be at the right time, very good defensively, just doing the subtle stuff really well, a real workhorse. I'm sure that, you're going to, over the course of your career, have highs and lows, and you're going to be able to really excel. It's very hard to be consistently brilliant for 10 or 12 years in a position like that. You're going to have little niggles. You're going to have issues that hold you back, including the concussions that he's had. So I think I think he's been punished in some ways by the lofty standards that he set for himself, and just wasn't able to kind of get back to that level until recently. So I think everyone would be delighted to see him back playing the rugby that he is playing, considering what concussive episodes he's had, but also the form that he's shown, and delivering against, again, that really physical hard edge side, particularly those second rows with the reputations that they have. I saw today that Warren Gatland, if he was picking a Lions test team or Lions 23, that he picked James Ryan in the second row, and Maro Toji's on the bench, Tyke Byrne and James Ryan. So it just shows that he's he's maybe for the quiet years that he's had, he's back with a real bang now, and now players, like everybody else, need those things to drive them on to continued high standards.
Did Gatland pick Sexton in this review team, by the way?
He did, yeah. He did, yeah.
He made a mess of that tour.
I think if you look at, leaving Johnny out, like, to not pick him because he was worried about his ability to play multiple games, maybe you read too many of Jerry's article, talking about not being able to play in 3 consecutive games. And sometimes, Johnny would have been taken out of the ability to play 3 consecutive games. So I don't know. He did make a little bit of a hames of it, because I don't think he got one of the best players in Europe playing in it. But also, times change too. Was James playing his best rugby back then? No, he wasn't.
He wasn't.
Right? Was James and Gibson Park in the conversation then? No, he wasn't. So it's like, it's like someone that you invite to your wedding. In 5 years' time, would you invite the same people? Not a chance. So it's do with friendships. Friendships can sometimes be transient, as is form in a rugby field. I had this conversation with my wife. We laugh occasionally about some of the people that are at our wedding. I don't think I've seen them for the last 12 years.
Just when you mentioned there, so Ryan, his attributes are not size, and then Tyke Byrne, attributes not necessarily size, but many attributes nonetheless. So will South Africa and France still in their private moments say, yeah, look, they're good players, but actually we really fancy that second row? Like, can Byrne and Ryan take on South Africa and France, for instance, in a World Cup, and us feel good about it?
That will be a target area. Of course it will, because of the size differential, and Leinster's Achilles heel and Ireland's Achilles heel over the last 4 or 5 years, when they have come undone, have been in physicality, but that's the game over. That's like, I mean, everybody, the game is won and lost on physicality. So when it's a real strength of you as a team, like Japan aren't going to come over and go, let's try and really, that second row, that fields, we'll get them there. So that's why France, South Africa, England will always look at trying to target that type of game against us. Other sides will play fast and frenetic and feel they've got higher skill levels. So yeah, you can be sure that when the bigger sides do come on, they go, right, if we can really bring our physicality to as close to 100% as possible, these guys can't live with us through sheer mass and size. And there's an argument to be said that we haven't been able to do it in the past on occasions.
Yeah, in some ways that's what, like, an amazing achievement, and it bodes well for the World Cup. And yet I think what will stop people getting too far ahead of themselves is, one, we've got 2 or 3 players that just can't get injured, and then 2, there's still the size issue. So we emerged from this tour with those 2.
That's not going away,
act.
Joe. Yeah, that's not going away. I think we can't lose our loose head prop. For years it was tight head prop. Now we can't lose our loose head. He's one of our most important players. The emergence of Dan Sheehan, huge. But even Rob Herring coming on with that big moment, what will that do for his confidence? And as the third choice, like, all of a sudden is Dan Sheehan starting ahead of Kelleher. So lovely headaches to be had. But we can't afford to lose our best players. We can't afford to lose Johnny. We can't afford to lose Robbie Henshaw. And I would say, Porter, those 3 feel huge. I know we've got Gary and Bundy that could fit in, but I think look at the performance from Robbie Henshaw last season. Again, massive performance. I think he's a huge player for this team. It's him plus 1. That's right. The conversation, because Bundy played great at the weekend too. Yeah. I think I've always been a Gary and Robbie fan, because of the balance of what the 2 of them looked like beside one another. I thought Bundy was brilliant. He really was. He carried with such intent, ran great lines, didn't overplay his hands, subtlety where needed. Defensively, the usual warrior self. But it's still Robbie plus Gary or Bundy. It's very fortunate that we have 3 centers playing as well as the 3 of them are.
Yeah, rarely all 3 fit, I suppose, is the thing. Yeah, I did think of Henshaw during this tour. I was like, God, you can take his 8.5 to 9 out of 10 performances for granted at this stage.
Yeah, you do. And yeah, he's just got this massive engine. It's like a nonstop, low error. It's funny when the camera goes to him, when you can tell certain guys when he makes the odd error, he really beats himself up about it, because it's a bit of a collector's item. He's just Mr. Consistent for the team on both sides of the ball. And even, Will Jordan, when he took on Johnny for his try, like, Henshaw was tracking him. And, he was doing his level best to keep up with him. He just had too much of a head start on him. So it's just moments like that tell you an awful lot, never giving up on anything. And he's shown it consistently for a number of years. And he for me is a real, kind of he's a leader in not what he says, but he's really unheralded as a key component to this team, like a really key component to this team. Because I don't think, from memory, we've never gone quite as well without him.
Yeah. Last one. Anyone else that you want to mention? I know you could literally mention everyone.
You could. Mac Hansen, thought he'd do a great game. Got really busy. James Lowe as well. You could mention anyone. We haven't even touched on the back row, which seems wrong with Doris and Van der Fleer, but you're right, you could go through absolutely everyone. But I was really impressed with Mac Hansen. We were wondering, he was brilliant for Connacht and he deserved his first cap, and I thought he was exceptional against Wales in his first cap, not overplaying his hand. But again, little 50-50s, but contests in the air, batting the ball back when it looked as though it's a lost cause. Good kicks ahead, keeping the ball in play, putting pressure on. Just the small, simple stuff. No real great frills, because sometimes wingers have that striker's mentality that they've got to score tries. He's happy to do all the groundwork as well. If he gets on the ball to James Lowe that stuck Will Jordan for that pass. Like that was if Johnny had thrown that, we'd be waxing lyrically. Like Will Jordan was completely done by it, and that was right on the advantage line. So those moments are huge to the overall context of victories, and he had lots of those little wins, just playing off Gibson Park as well, getting advantage line a yard or two when we're on the back foot, or he just he knows the scrum half needs a little bit of help because he's running down a blind alley. Really, really clever stuff. So very impressed with his performance last weekend too.
Okay, very good. Our rugby coverage and off the ball, thanks to Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us. Brian, that was great. Thank you so much.
Nice one. Cheers, Joe. Talk to you.